There, we are live on Facebook. Shout out to everybody who is watching. We are going to make sure that this posts and give everybody a second to get online. We're going to check it out here. Give you a minute. Oh, I see the live event is happening, so I should boost that. Make that available to all my friends. Start a watch party. Join me now. Look at that. Everybody say hi.
Hi.
Hey.
There we go. That's totally awkward. Well, I think we have 5 people joining us. We'll give it just another second, and we'll welcome Amanda Mitchell. We'll welcome anybody who I see jumps on. I'm looking at you waving, Allison, because it's a few seconds behind. There we go. People are joining. So why don't we begin? Because for the viewers who are going to watch this later, they're going to see all this kind of chit chat at the beginning. But welcome. We are live. Oxnay is online. Thank you for joining us tonight for a community discussion. We are going to fearlessly and boldly and courageously begin a discussion tonight on racism, prejudice, and the need for change. So I thank you for joining us. You can see I have a fantastic looking panel here of folks ready to share their heart and their wisdom and their story with you. So why don't I let everyone introduce yourself? Let's start with you, Allison.
Hi, my name is Allison Springer, and I am from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And I was born in Toronto, grew up in Hamilton, and came out west for school and did my practicum out here in the East End of Calgary and fell in love with the youth that I was working with. What I do for a living is I'm a youth speaker, a professional youth speaker. So I travel all across Canada, and I've been to Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and have spoken in some of the schools out in the Maritimes. What's up? And as well, I run a nonprofit organization called Young Women of Power. Just going off a little something right there. Anyways, yes, and so where it's about building girls' confidence and helping them to be safe and transform girl culture.
So Alex, now you get to introduce yourself and keep up with that.
Oh, that's
right
really
here, guy,
good.
right here.
I can do that. Yeah, my name is Alexander Stephen. I live in Lower Sackville, Nova Scotia. I grew up in Toronto. Came out here for university. I played basketball at St. Francis Xavier University, and ended up falling in love with the Maritimes. After school, moved back to the city, and then came back to the East Coast. So right now, my wife and I, we run a coffee shop in Lower Sackville, and I play music as well. And yeah.
He says that modestly, doesn't he, Tim?
He sure does.
And Tim, introduce yourself to the listening crowd tonight.
Tim Cook, coming to you from Hammonds Plains, Nova Scotia. I've got a corporate background with a company called Nortel. Don't hold that against me. My wife and I planted a church in Dartmouth in 2013. And most recently, we've planted a church and a coffee house just last September, and that's here in Hammonds Plains. It's called Hub 214. It's Hub 214 Coffee House and Hub 214 Church.
Awesome. And for those of you who maybe haven't had the chance to get an introduction, my name is Jodi. I'm the lead pastor here, and the face you get to see on Oxnay is online. And really, I just want everyone listening to know my heart in doing this tonight and really kind of bringing this group together is because I believe that we need to love each other better. And so we are going to go through a process tonight of sharing and discussing and learning with just the sole aim of understanding so that we can know and love each other better. I want to share as we open a quote with you. It is from a historian, Howard Zinn, and he said to be neutral, to be passive in a situation is to collaborate with whatever is going on. And I think the time has come for us to move out of neutral, for us to move out of just saying I'm against racism and understand that we need to be anti-racist. So I was looking a little bit as I was preparing into what that means. And it means, friends, that we need to move out of that place of fear. That's the place where we deny a problem exists, where we deny racism is happening all around us, where we avoid asking hard questions, where we avoid difficult conversations, and we just surround ourselves with people who are like us and agree with everything we think. We need to move from that fearful place into a place of learning, and that's what tonight is all about. It's about recognizing there's a problem, recognizing my own privilege, and ignoring racism itself is a privilege. And it's about seeking to understand, looking for answers, educating ourselves. And really, it's about a humility that allows us to be vulnerable to say, I don't know things that I need to know, and I have biases. And I need to hear and listen those that are around me that have a different experience than I do. So that is the heart. Tonight is about learning to bring change, learning to love each other, and so that we can grow and be part of the change in our world. We don't want it to always be like this. And so this is how we begin. And so let me just toss it right to Tim, and he's going to start with Alex, and we're going to hear his story and let the learning begin, friends. If you're in and ready to learn, give us some thumbs up. Let us know you are listening and ready, and off we go. Oh, you're on mute, Tim.
Well, it works better when I'm off of mute. You're right. Alex is far too modest in his introduction. I should tell you, we served together in a church, and Alex led the praise and worship team, and he happens to be a Juno-nominated recording artist. So what a pleasure that was. He said he played for St. X. Well, he was the captain of St. X. And right now, he is leading a coffee house called Apartment 3 Coffee. And he's the owner, and he helps to operate it as well, he and his wife. And so enough of me talking, Alex. I want to get right to it, and we want to hear from you. What's your experience been with racism, with this topic in general?
Yeah, whoa, that's a very broad question. I think, bringing it back, I'm the first, I guess, second generation Canadian. My parents, my mom was from England. She's white. My dad was from the Caribbean islands, Trinidad and Tobago, and he's Black. They met in Toronto in the 70s and had me. And growing up, I feel like I knew my dad was Black, but as a kid, it was just he was my dad, and everybody was equal. And then I remember clearly in grade 3, my grade 3 teacher, she was a Jamaican lady, and we were sitting on the carpet, and it was kind of story time, and she was saying that, racism exists, and we were talking about like Martin Luther King and what he was fighting for, and being the only kid of color in the class at that time. She said, like, kids, remember, like, if back in this time, Alex's family was to get in a car accident, his mom would go to one hospital and he and his dad would go to another hospital. And I remember that kind of hitting my mind, and that was the start of understanding, okay, there's been a past, and there is a current present, and understanding that. And as I grew in school, I remember I went to a new school in grade 7, and as soon as I got there, people were making fun of me for my race. And I felt, that was when I really first felt the rejection. I felt the loneliness, and just really being set apart, and wishing that there was somebody there to stand up for me as the new student. And I think through as I grew into a man in my early 20s, it's when things started to become I would say more and more scary in life. I mean, I had high school teachers say, you know what, even if you get into university, you're never going to make it. And in university, I had teachers saying, you're going to, first day of class, he's like, you're going to fail this class. And I remember just being afraid to drive at night. I had, anytime I went out in the night, you know, my parents would always say, come home quick, don't stay out late. And I remember just having this fear because I felt like I was frequently getting pulled over for nothing. I'd come out of my friend's house and get in the car, multiple cop cars are squeezing me in, and they say, you know, what are you doing? I go out for a run. This is when I came to Nova Scotia. Police would stop me. What are you doing? Who are you? All this. And I felt like I was feeling, I was always guilty in a sense before they even knew me. And I kind of had this fear of the police and anger of the police in my 20s, just because I always felt like I was a suspect for no reason. And a lot of my other friends, you know, didn't have those experiences. And I think, you know, that can slowly just become a part of who you are, and just a part of your being. It feels like that's just normal life. And you know, even now, I don't drive at night. I try not to go out anywhere at night, drive on the roads, because I know survey says I'm going to get stopped. And then those kind of feelings, you start wanting to, you know, prove people wrong. And that, I think, was maybe what helped me excel in some ways in school. Because people may judge me for my look. Back then I used to have dreadlocks and felt so much cooler than I do now. But but yeah, I wanted to prove people wrong, that you may have an opinion of me because of what you think you see, but I'm so much more, and I'm gonna prove it to you, and almost living with that chip on your shoulder.
Did you see a difference, Alex? You moved from Toronto to Nova Scotia. Was there a difference?
Yeah, I felt there was a massive difference. Growing up, I feel like Toronto, the areas and the circles that I was in, a lot of the people were new immigrants. They were children of immigrants who had recently come to Canada. When I moved to Nova Scotia, the Black people had been here for generations, and I really noticed a difference in the hurt and the pain in that demographic. Very different culture than, you know, the West Indies or the islands, which was a culture that I was used to. And yeah, it was interesting, really, really interesting. And I feel because of that, I noticed a lot more separation between races in Nova Scotia, a lot more, and the line was very clear. Yeah.
What about, you spent time in Antigonish when you were at St. FX, and now you're living in Lower Sackville, and you've been here for a while. Were there differences in those two communities? Interesting question. I feel like my experience in Antigonish was maybe a little bit different than maybe normal, because I was on the basketball team, and people know who you are. Right.
And
You were a star.
Oh,
This is popular.
It was fun while it lasted. But I feel like, you know, in Lower Sackville, it's just you're just one of everyone else, you know. So you don't have that kind of recognition.
Now, what about your lovely wife, Heather? Has she experienced anything? What's her experience been?
You mean with experiencing racism with me, or?
Yes.
I feel like when we met and have got to know each other, and we're dating, and even through our relationship, she really didn't have a clue, or didn't really understand the fact of racism existing, and in current times today, and the impact that it had on me, and even interpreting situations differently because of racist experiences in my past. So I think for her, it's been a big eye opener, a big educational thing. She grew up in the West, but she was in track and field and high level sports. So she understood maybe Black culture a little bit better than maybe the average person. But even then, still, she didn't really understand the implications and the fact that it still goes on today.
And I should clarify, I have the opportunity to know Heather and to know that she's white, for our listeners out there. She
Yeah.
should clarify that. What about in the business world? Alex, you're a business owner. In fact, I think you own a couple different businesses. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience as a business owner?
Yeah. Good question. Yeah, I mean, I feel like in business, the coffee business is interesting because there's not a lot of Black people in coffee. I know growing up, we always drank like tea or Milo or Ovaltine or something like that.
Allison is loving that right now.
Yeah. And not so much coffee. But yeah, it's been interesting. I mean, as of late in these tough times, I've noticed it's been great to have the support of the Black community, supporting the local business and local Black owned business. Which has been really good. But it's challenging because, like being someone of color in an industry that's really not so much, you just kind of paving your way, proving that you belong in this industry is something that's a constant struggle.
It's interesting, Alex, that you say that, because I really worked as a woman in a male industry. And I can totally feel that I need to prove myself. It took a long time, actually, for me to come to the place of loving myself and being confident with myself, that I wasn't talking too much or working just to try to come up to the level. And so it's interesting that, I can see a little bit into that as you speak it, just from that perspective.
Right. Yeah, so true.
Hey, Allison, I've been posing these questions to Alex. As Alex comments and answers some of my questions, are there some things that you'd like to add or even speak into some of the things he's addressed?
I find it interesting hearing your story, Alex, and as well, I come from a West Indian background as well. My family's from Barbados, but I was born in Toronto. I grew up in Canada, and something that I think that's important for people to know is that everybody's story is different. When it comes to Black people, like, you can't assume like, okay, I got a Black friend and now I know everything. You can't do that. You can't do that. Because we have different stories.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah. You're not a party favor. Like, look, I got Allison, so I understand. No, I mean, you're one lady that's dynamic and you're you. But yeah, you're an individual.
Yeah, and how our experiences and how our personality, how we interpret them, how they have effects on our lives is so different, Yeah.
Because the difference as well between us would be the Black male experience versus the Black female experience. And so in regards to being pulled over, I mean, not to say that doesn't happen, but I know when it came to my cousins, my male cousins, oh man, they have a lot of stories, a lot more than I, and it just looks different for us.
Wow. What really got me, Alex, when you were sharing was, I wrote down a few notes, but, wishing somebody would stand up for me. That just cuts to my heart, because I just feel like everybody who's listening and raising a generation of kids today, to teach them to stand up. Like, I look back and see the times I didn't do that so well, but that's a real concrete something that we can do as we hear your story and we look for takeaways and action steps is teach people to stand up. Somebody needs that encouragement, even when people were speaking negative to you, like teacher, or like you're not going to do it. Someone to be in your corner. You can do this, you know, not always you have to prove it. That really, really speaks to me as you share.
Yeah,
Jodi?
and I think that that's something that goes for all ages too. You know, I work predominantly with youth, but I mean, I speak with adults as well. But if there's any teens and children and young adults that are listening, know that there's something that you can do in just coming around people. You know, when I was growing up, when I think about it, my most the times where I experienced the most discrimination and the most racism was when I was a child. And when I talk to people, other Black people, like my friends, that's something that I hear too. The incredible things that happened to them when they were a child. And so just with what you're saying, I mean, those are very formidable years, and how important it is for someone to come alongside of you during your teen years. We have so many new immigrants that are coming to Canada, you know, and are entering into our school systems and even on a university level or in the workplace. But just like what you're saying, Alex, to have somebody beside you standing up with you that knows their rights, what's allowed to happen, what's not allowed to happen, and to speak up when sometimes you can't, that's powerful. At any age, that's powerful.
Mm-hmm. And you spoke, Alex, of normal life for you. And it just, again, it just rips into my heart. Like, we need a new normal, right? If that's normal, friends listening, we need a new normal. That's just, and that's what this is about. For everybody is changing the dialogue. And Allison, I know, kind of on that note, that you and I have talked a lot about what is happening today with since George Floyd's death, since the social media blow up, everything that's now becoming like surfaced and being discussed, that has really affected you and your journey. And so can you kind of pull us into your journey through the stuff like more recent that's been happening and how it's impacted you?
You know, living here in Canada, you adapt. And, you know, I'm not looking to see, oh, you're racist and pointing fingers at people. No, you want to get along, and to a certain extent, at times you want to blend in. And one of the things, and you're silent sometimes about certain things that happen to you. And growing up, your parents tell you something, you know what? You're Black, Allison, you got to work twice as hard. And there's just different things that you grow up with. And so you just know, okay, well, this is the way things go. I just need to be quiet about stuff and do the best that I can. And this whole situation with George Floyd, it has really, I didn't realize that there were some issues that were in my heart that I had ignored and had not been dealt with. And watching interviews online, on TV, researching myself in regards to what happened with George Floyd, and listening to fellow Canadians, Black Canadians, share their personal story, there's some things that have come up for me that have actually began to kind of peel back some layers of things that I didn't realize were there when it comes to racism. And it's been a process and a journey of healing of my heart. In the beginning, when everything was happening, I got to be honest, I was angry. I mean, not at just what happened in the US, because if you're Black, you've been following that stuff forever. Like, it's nothing new to us. There's many other names in the US of African Americans that you've heard of that have been shot. And so now to see the world jumping on it and being like, oh my goodness, what? Can you believe that? Black lives really matter. I'm like, dude, they've mattered forever, just so you know. You know, but now you're jumping on and tagging me on on Twitter to promote me. I received phone calls and messages from people I haven't heard from for years, people that hadn't talked to me. I am a speaker, I'm a public person, but unfortunately, for whatever reasons, there's just some people that choose other people, they're groupie. But now, because the spotlight was on Black people, all of a sudden I was getting calls and people wanted to talk to me and wanted to find out what I thought and wanted to hear my opinion for the first time. And honestly, I felt used by the whole situation. And I didn't touch social media, and I just want to pass this on to people and for all the Black listeners that are on there, and not even just Black listeners, but for any minorities that might be listening. When things happen, and it's important that in your anger and in your hurt, you don't turn to social media, because too often we can say things that we regret. And I'm so thankful that I didn't say a word. I just allowed the process and the journey just to rumble inside of myself. And it was in that place that all of a sudden healing started to take place, when one of the issues that I had was how everybody's focusing on Black, now turning to me as a Black female and wanting to know what I thought. I believe personally, especially in my adult years, I felt more discrimination towards myself of being a female than being Black. And no one was talking about that. And so being a Black woman, here I am experiencing this. And I was listening to a speaker, T.D. Jakes, and something that he spoke about when he was talking about racism in the US. He acknowledged, who understands discrimination? Females do. And there was just something in that process, and him saying that, there was a healing that began to take place in my heart. I heard some insight in regards to George Floyd and his story, and just a voice that said, you know what, he didn't deserve to die that way. And sometimes in the process, we've been looking at, oh man, that police officer, and there's been the focus on the riots versus this man who lost his life in such a traumatic way, that we kind of lost sight of that. And again, there's just another layer that was being peeled away from myself. And out of that place, there was just so much healing. And even still now, there's healing that's taking place as I hear other speakers and other presenters and other influencers giving platforms for Black people and people of minorities, their voices to speak up. As I listen, there's things that I'm identifying with that I didn't realize was hidden deep in my soul, that had not ever been acknowledged, and just quietly. And I find that that's for people, folks, what I found for the healing process, sometimes you do need to go to counseling for things, but other times, sometimes the human part of us just needs certain things to be acknowledged and to be said publicly. And there's been people that have apologized for certain things and have backtracked, and discrimination has been called out when it hasn't been before. Mm-hmm. And it's been something that's been healing my heart. And so that's been a little bit of the process for me during this time.
Wow. And I think it's something that we're grappling with on all sides, because it really, as you said, it really stood out to me when on social media, the blackout, and everybody was posting about it. And I had a conversation with someone who was Black, and it wasn't our conversation. It was a different one that I had, but the girl said, I don't feel like any of these people care, because I'm facing this every day, and none of the people posting this have ever given any indication to me that they understand anything about what I go through. And I have to be honest, that really hit me. I had to look at myself. And that's part, I think, for every person that's listening, in the place that I was, it's hard to say I'm a leader and and a pastor and I love God and I'm talking about loving people. And I didn't see, just as you didn't see things that needed to heal, Allison, I didn't see things in me. I didn't understand. And a great visual for me was the rock. When you drop a rock in, the water, the ripples are big close, but as you go further and further out, the ripples are smaller. And I've used that when I have traveled a lot to Africa and talked about maybe issues of marginalization and hunger and stuff like that in my past roles. We don't feel hunger because it's far away from us. We don't feel some of these things, but it's our responsibility to feel it because it is real for other people. And if we only feel what, like for me and my own children, like anything that's super, super close, that in my heart, at least in my mind, is what I see. I need to change. I need to recognize I'm not the center of the universe where the rock drops. Like waves hit other people and I need to care. And I need to be willing to dialogue, even if it means I've made mistakes. And have a real humility in that. So I get it. That really was hard for, I think, everyone on every angle when all this came up. Everybody was like, what does this mean to me? Where do I fit in this? And I think it's called a lot of us to really take stock.
Yeah, and I think that that's important. It doesn't matter your race, doesn't matter your background. It's something that's happening right now. And it's interesting and it's ironic that in the midst of a pandemic where there's sickness, that there's great healing that is actually taking place in the hearts of people around the world right now, because there's been such division in different places that has been unspoken. And now it's coming to the forefront. And I think it's important as well for everyone to stay open, just like what you said, Jodi, staying open and not becoming defensive. Oh, so what? They're attacking me? What? They're saying using white privilege on me? No. Don't get defensive. Just be open and reflect and self-examine.
That's a great word for our whole day. Wouldn't you agree with that, Tim and Alex? It's not to be defensive because we need to change. Because let's face it, this world and what's happening now needs to change. So that means I need to change. I need to recognize others need to change. There's healing that's needed. There's learning. And if we just say, oh no, that's just, push it away because we don't want to admit any wrong. Well, that's unfortunate. Very, very unfortunate.
Yep.
Well, we have a little something special. Is it okay, Allison, if we jump to share? So I have something that I caught my eye that Allison shared on social media. It's not very long, but it's really powerful. And it's a challenge for all of us. So if you're ready for a challenge, we have something really special that I'm just going to go here and try to share with you.
Yeah. Right. And as you're setting it up, Jodi, I just want to say this came out of that healing process for me. I didn't have words at first, but this video, this talk, whatever you want to call it, my response to what happened with George Floyd and social media came out of a place of healing. Yeah, out of a healthy place.
Awesome. All right, well, let's take a peek.
I have a question. What's easier? What's easier, to march and protest or confront discrimination in your workplace? What's easier, to post your thoughts and opinions and liking pictures of Black Lives Matter on social media? Or telling one of your friends to stop mocking that person's accent? What's easier? Guilting or harassing someone because they aren't responding to the atrocity of George Floyd and racism in the US the way you want them to? Or taking time to self-reflect at the ways you've discriminated and made assumptions about people because of their age or the way that they look and actually apologize to them? What's easier? Creating forums to talk about the problem, or promoting women and visible minorities into positions of leadership and actually paying them for it? What's easier? What's easier, to blame Donald Trump or be the change in your community? What's easier, pointing the finger at the police officers or raising your kids to be respectful of all people? What's easier, seeing the world's injustice or doing something about the injustice in your world? What's easier, adopting the problems of the US or hiring Indigenous men and women and stop the murdering of our Indigenous sisters? What's easier, to hate those who hurt you or extend your friend group to the new neighbors on the block or to that person that you don't know yet? What's easier? Do the hard thing.
Wasn't that a powerful call to all of us?
So good.
Just there we go. We went, I had the White House come on for a talk. Allison, that was so powerful as we look to what next. And I don't know if people that are listening are like me, but I'm always like, okay, when I'm ready to come face to face with something, I need to change, I need to learn, I'm willing to do it, then what do I do? So can you help us with that a little bit? And Alex, I'd love for you to take a stab at that as well. What are some practical things that we can start to do the hard thing? Just kind of let's bring that out for everybody listening. And just while you're getting your thoughts for that, if you have a question, this is a great time to be thinking of your questions and post them, because we're going to have a few minutes to take your questions. So throw it on Facebook and we will get to it in just a few minutes. So Allison.
First, I want to speak to my Black brothers and sisters out there. You know what? Honestly, we've been given a platform right now. And I believe that it's not meant to bash people or guilt people, but to bring restoration and reconciliation. And I believe that we can help lead this with other nationalities and other races as well. And I just want to encourage you practically to allow the healing process to happen within your own heart. You know, sometimes we can get defensive when people ask, so where were you born? Where are you from? I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm from here. What are you saying? You know, like sometimes we get a little defensive, a little, as Alex said, sometimes, you know, people assume you got a chip on your shoulder. Well, sometimes, honestly, we do. Sometimes we do. And that's that defensive reaction. And I know there's things that are bothersome that people keep saying over and over, and you get the same questions again and again, you know, but I just encourage, you know, people are wanting to learn. People are genuinely asking questions. And I just encourage my Black brothers and sisters to be open and willing to teach, because right now people's ears are wide open, and out of a spirit of love, not resentment. And that's why the healing process is so important for all of us, to let that happen, but then being able to speak out of that place. So that's one of the things I want to say. Alex, you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that that's beautiful. This is our time to affect change. And you know, every change comes and growth comes with growing pains, and I feel like we're going through those pains right now, and let's make the most of this opportunity. Let's make a difference for the generations to come by embracing it, and like you said, you know, being open to share and not take offense, because this is that window where we have people's ears. It's a beautiful thing.
Well said. And then on the other hand, for those that are listening and are wondering, okay, so I'm the majority and I'm not a minority or visible minority. So what can I practically do? You know, and this is something for everybody and for all people. As Canadians, we're known as being polite and nice. And honestly, when it comes to injustice, politeness does not apply. When you see things going on in your workplace and there's conviction, like we know when something's wrong. And today I'm giving you permission to act on it. When you see something wrong and you've got this sense, I should say something, I'm giving you permission to say something. As Alex had mentioned earlier, and I agree, if somebody was using the N-word and being racist, and I would want my neighbors and my community to come alongside of me. I would want them to make their presence known. You know, sometimes people who have very hearts of great hatred, in that moment, sometimes they won't be changed by maybe one thing that you said. Sometimes that can happen, but I'll be honest, oftentimes it's rare. But to side along the people and let them know who've been wronged against, oh man, that makes such a world of a difference. There may be thoughts that go through your head and says, oh, you know what, it happens, they'll survive. No, stand alongside them and even say, you know what they said was wrong. Even to let that person know that's not acceptable here. And just speak up. Canadians, it's time.
That's right. It's time to, what did I start with? Not be neutral and not be passive, but to stand against things that are racist that we hear, things that are racist that we see. And I just want to give a shout out like to my daughter. She just, you know, she's graduated with social work, and I'm just going to be real like honest with you. There's things that I didn't know, and she has been educated and teaching and telling us, and I'm proud of her because she is doing that, modeling. That's not okay to say. And sometimes I'm like, really? Oops, like I think I've said that in front of church, like, oh my land. I certainly didn't say it from a bad place, but I wasn't sensitive. I didn't understand. And so I don't want to be defensive. And I read a quote on Instagram, and it said, give the people that are different around you, that are in the minority, give them the voice to correct you. Give them permission. That's kind of like what you were saying. And so like, Allison, if we were hanging out and you were my best friend and we were around and I was doing some things that, you know, maybe I never gave you that space to say that's not right, like, because I'm asking you. And that's really what both of you guys have said, is this is a time, if people are willing to say, you know what, I was wrong, be willing to say I was wrong and ask for help and be willing to help. It's going to take everybody really working on this together, because every side is scared to use their voice. It can be intimidating to anyone to stand up at any time, on any side.
Yep, that's good. And especially when it comes to our new immigrants, we, you know, racism. I remember what my dad experienced. I'm first generation Canadian. I remember the stuff that he experienced in his workplace. He was a machinist in Hamilton and would not be promoted, and the things that the guys there in the trades, the stuff that they said to him. And I remember hearing those conversations at home. But and even today, it's still happening today. As I hear some of my friends, they keep their mouths shut because they don't want to get in trouble, because they're new here. They're new in the land. And they don't always know what their rights are. Now, because I've been lived here in Canada, you can't get me to shut up, yo. I'll speak up. Okay? But for new immigrants, that's not the same case. And so practically being their voice, helping and coming alongside them, and speaking up for them. Alex, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I agree. You know, when people feel that they're not alone, what's that saying that says, you know, silence is, you know, I don't know if it's compliance or supporting, you know, what's happening. We those who've been given opportunity to stand and support, let's do that. Let's all look at ourselves and see, hey, where am I writing people off or putting people in a box or not giving people a chance, jumping to conclusions about who they are, about what they can do. Yeah, I think it's so good, for sure.
Now we have a couple of questions. So this first one, and if anybody else has one, go ahead and post. We still have a few minutes before our hour's up. Allison, a question for you was, do you feel social media is so hurtful and harmful as I do? So this is from someone who feels that on social media, a lot of hurtful things can happen. So what are your thoughts on social?
I've got a bit of a rule for myself. If there is something that I'm reading on social media that evokes or invokes an intense response, an intense emotional response, whether it's extreme anger, I am weeping like crazy and my heart is just wrecked, there's a problem. There's a problem. And so that kind of stuff, I need to stop watching. There's people that I don't follow. There's a lot of things that I don't watch on social media. That includes the news as well. And it's gauging your emotion, because when it's controlling you, there's a problem. When it's leading you, something's wrong. Honestly, there are incredible gifted writers and people that are influencers and even the news that wants to invoke or bring out and draw out of you intense emotions to stir up things like riots, and great division and arguments and intensity on media and in people's lives. You know what, folks? Don't play the game. Don't play it. And so if you're finding, whoever asked that question, if you're finding that it is hurtful, then remove it. I'm very careful. Again, if you use this as a rule, don't post out of hurt. Don't post out of anger. More than anything, we really need to dialogue with people face to face. So much gets lost in text messages, in emails, and the same thing with social media. And so there's some people that are trying to debate people online. Why? It's not going to work. We were made to interact with each other. And so even at least a phone call, I know we're social distancing, at least a phone call. And so there's been intense conversations that I've had on MS Messenger, and I just stopped. Once it got to a point, I'm like, stop. You know what? Give me a call. Here's my cell phone number if you want to talk about this. Because I know people that weren't understanding what I was saying, and there was so much miscommunication. Okay, give me a call.
It's a good rule. Yeah, good rule. Alex, I have one for you. It says, the question came, since Black Lives Matter became popular and is really in the media, it seems it's okay to call Black people Black. In the past, that was unacceptable, and African American was the term, or person of color. Where I guess they want help with titles. Is there a correct title that can be used that won't cause offense? Like, that's, people can laugh. That's so true, because I don't ever mean to offend people. And it's like you're dancing on, how do I not say the wrong thing? What could you say to that, Alex? And then maybe Tim or Allison, if you guys have a thought as well. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute, Alex.
Oh, yeah. And that's the end. No, I'm just kidding. That is a good question. I don't know if I have the answer for that. I might phone a friend, Allison, because like, you know, it feels like sometimes I think along what aligns what Allison was saying before, through people's experiences, sometimes people are looking for offense. Things that can be said are offensive one way or another. So Allison, I don't know if you have a professional rule around that.
Yeah, Allison, what are your thoughts around it's like labels in the Indigenous community and Aboriginal and Native, and then it's like, if you're trying to be sensitive, how do you find out? How do you know? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I love this. And this is what I think is so good for people to see. We don't have it figured out. We don't know, you know, and And that's why it's a process and a journey for all of us to figure this thing out. Okay, so some people have called me African American. I'm Canadian. What's up? You know, and part of it, what happens is the culture in the US is so strong, it creeps over across the Canadian border. And so I believe that's where the African Canadian term has kind of come from. We call them African Americans, and so I must be an African Canadian. I got West Indian roots. Like, I know we come originally from Africa, but personally, for myself, I prefer being Black. Now, I know a gentleman who was African American. He was from North Carolina, living now in Canada, and he was offended by Black. He's like, "Oh no, we in the States, you don't call us Black, call us colored." I was like, "What? Don't you dare call me colored! Don't you dare!" You know?
That's a no-no. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a no-no.
I had an experience on the basketball court. I can remember about 20 years ago, I was trying to explain to a friend of mine, my best friend at the time, who happens to be Black. And I was trying to explain to him who this other player was, trying to describe the other player. And I kept going along until I got to, well, you know, he's a gentleman of color. And my friend looked at me and said, "Bro, it's okay to say he's Black." So that was 20 years ago. So I've been sticking with that one.
Exactly. That's how I feel. I'm Black and I'm proud of it. You know?
I had a conversation with a lady this past week, and she said, in her opinion, you know, she struggles with why all this racial stuff. We're all one race. Like, why not be one race? We're all the human race, and our skins are different colors. So, I mean, in her to acknowledge our equality, she would express that as, you might be brown skinned or black skinned or white skinned or whatever, but that's just your skin color. You're the human race. But I know on the other side, like, you know, that could be offensive. So, I mean, I think what that says to me is we need grace for each other. We need humility. I mean, Allison and I, we talked in the kind of the prep for this session, we talked a little bit about the fact that I have been to so many countries in Africa. I've been all over and did a lot of work overseas. And in that, I mean, I love African people, like my heart. I've like a lot of friends all over. So when I get in a cab, when I'm somewhere in Canada and I can hear that, I'm like, oh, that kind of sounds like an Ethiopian accent. I want to ask them, you know, but it's like, I'm not racist. I'm really just interested. How do I say to someone, please don't be mad. But I want to honor their culture because I think it's important, but I don't know where they're at in the healing. I haven't experienced the pain they've gone through. And so, Allison, you gave me some really good wisdom about the cat. So why don't you give that to everybody, because that was a great little tidbit that I found helpful.
Yeah, somebody said to me, I can't remember who it was, but it really painted a great visual. And when people are in their wounded state, like for example, like a wounded animal or a wounded, say you found a wounded cat, and as you approach it, you're wanting to support it, you're wanting to help it, right? But every now and then that cat, even though as you're approaching it, it'll scratch you, you know, and sometimes, but still you don't give up. You see what's going on here, and there's a bigger picture that's involved. And it is, you know, helping. And for us today, it's about unity. It's about reconciliation. That is the bigger picture. And for all people, when you're asking your questions, you might get scratched. People might be like, why are you asking me that?
Yeah.
You know, there may be some people like that, but for the sake, and you might feel offended. Oh, but don't back off. Hold on. You need to keep going. Endure. For the sake of the bigger picture, which is reconciliation, don't give up. And so not everybody's going to be like that. And so keep moving forward. Don't give up.
Mm-hmm. So we need grace for each other. We need a new normal. We need to not give up. We have covered some great things. So now we're going to go into wrap up mode. So I need everybody to stir and shake it all up and come out with a final word for those listeners who are listening now. And I want to recognize there'll be some who will hear this in the days and weeks ahead. And if you have been listening and if this has been helpful to you, please give us a thumbs up. As you're listening, even in the future, if you think this is a dialogue that others need to hear, send it to friends, share it on your Facebook, say something, tell people why this is a conversation they need to be part of. If you want to hear more things like this, if you want this dialogue to go further, then you got to let me know. Oxnaz.ca is our website. And a little surprise tidbit on the side, if you go to oxnaz.ca, you are the very first people. It was just launched today. Give us your email. That'll come up when you go on, and we'll stay in touch, let you know these things are going to be happening. But really, let's just do our part to share this message, to encourage people like Alex and Allison and Tim to be vulnerable and to share. And myself, man, I'm just ready to admit that there's a lot I don't know, and I need to take responsibility to learn. My last kind of thought is this. I remember my first time in Africa, in Zambia. I remember being in downtown, and there was tons and tons of people, and every face was Black and I was white. And my heart was there because I loved people and I wanted to love and serve them. But all of a sudden, I couldn't deny the fact that I couldn't escape, that I was stuck out, I was noticed, and that was my reality. And what I'm learning from that is maybe there's a reality for other people that I have been privileged because it hasn't been my concern, like Alex talked about when he jumps in a car. That is my privilege. I am seeing it. I'm starting to feel it. But whether, like I said at the beginning, the ripple is far away or whether it's close, to me, I have to, if I want to love people better, which is my heart, I have to be willing to see that some things are splashing people right in the face and that wave is hurting them. And I need to care about it, and I need to do something about it. So kind of that's my final. Who is ready to hit us up next? Who's ready? Alex, are you ready?
Yeah.
Final word.
Yeah. Final word. Let's keep supporting one another. Let's not let anyone stand alone, and may our hearts be open to continue to grow, to self-examine, and to share gracefully.
Beautiful. Now, Allison, you're the one that has to top that. You did the introduction first and he had to come out, and that was pretty solid, Alex. Thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight, Alex. You've been just a blessing to hear and share, and your beautiful spirit as you share. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Allison,
final word.
Yeah, I would just encourage people to utilize their gifts, their strengths, and their positions. We all have a role, and there's all something that we can all do. Some of you may be encouragers. Others of you may be the loud spoken one that stands up and is, gutsy and bold. And there's just something that we can all do. Some of you might be supervisors or managers, and it's time that person ought to be promoted and be recognized. Others of you, it's your buddies on video games, and some of the comments that you're making about different races, it's like shutting those conversations down. There's something that we can all do, and so let's do our part. And I just want to say one thing to the Black community as well. We need to be proud of who we are.
Amen.
And celebrate that, and then as well impart that into our children. I remember feeling super insecure because I was a minority. But I've learned to be proud of who I am and where I've come from. And now I don't play defense anymore. I'm not easily offended by people, but I'm secure. And if we can instill that in our children and in those around us, that'll make a difference too.
Awesome, Allison. Thank you for being who you were made to be, using your voice to empower wisdom and empower young women and young people, and just joining us tonight. You are a force, and I thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you. I receive that.
Mr. Tim, how does all this land on you and in your heart in this moment as we wrap tonight?
Well, this issue has been heavy on my heart for quite some time. And I want to thank you, Pastor Jodi, for setting this up, and Allison and Alex. thank you for your time tonight. I think I've been thinking about this for a while, and I've heard the comments tonight, and it matches with what I want to share in my final thoughts. The answer, I don't think, is going to come from talking heads on media. It's not going to come from the justice system alone. It's not going to come from riots or screaming at people. It's not going to come from anything that's human made. And I think I'd be remiss in my pastoral role if I didn't say, I believe the answer is going to come from heaven, and the one who's in heaven, Jesus, King Jesus. Won't you just show us how to love one another?
Amen. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful.
So be it.
And that's it, guys. That's why we did this. What I said in the very beginning, this is all about my heart. Our ministry is in Oxnaz Online is to help people grow in love for God and for each other. We need to learn how to love each other, and it is going to be God that helps us. So I would like in this moment, this is a community session, but I just want to pray for just quickly for everybody and for unity. So let's just maybe end this in a sense of unity and corporate prayer. No matter where you're at as you listen to this tonight, let's kind of join our hearts in prayer as we close. Heavenly Father, God, I recognize that you are the creator and that you created all of us in your own image. You created us beautiful and unique with purposes and plans. And we recognize the brokenness in our world. We recognize the deep hurt and pain where we have been racist and where we have segregated people and othered them. Father, I just ask that you would help us, every person listening, to learn how to love better, to help us to love better, and to help us be the change, to be a voice, not just passive, not just letting it go, but be a voice to say it's time to change. We need to see a new normal, and we'll only do it with your help, God. So we reach out and ask for your love. We ask for your help and reconciliation, that all people would be equal and honored and have opportunities to be all that you made them and created them to be. I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you for listening. And if like I said, if you want to continue to be part, follow our Oxnaz Online, connect with us through our oxnaz.ca website, and we will continue these discussions. I hope that you felt that this was a benefit. Thank you, Tim, Allison, and Alex. It has certainly been a wonderful time of learning.
And Jodi, thank you for creating this platform to have this healthy discussion. Thank you so much. I honor you.
Awesome. Have a great night.
Peace, y'all.
Peace.